Is Georgia the new Oklahoma? Is the SEC the new Big 12? Let's talk about it. What's up, kid folk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you don't miss any of the segments that we upload here. Like the video and leave me a comment. Let me know. Do you think that the SEC's time is coming to an end? Do you think that Georgia is becoming what Oklahoma was in the age of the 4-team playoff? If you're returning and you haven't subscribed, I'm going to ask you to do that. You watch more than one segment. I think you like the show. And frankly, this is a very cool community. Like, we have a raucous and rolling conversation in the comments about all of these topics. And I invite you to join us as we are heading toward 128,000 subscribers to the community. Wild, cool, awesome. I don't think it's wild, cool, and awesome what Georgia's going through if I'm a Georgia fan. If I'm not a Georgia fan, couldn't happen to a better team, right? If I'm not an SEC fan, couldn't happen to a better conference. Because now we get to talk about, is the fall of the empire on the rise, or has it already come? I mean, take a look at it this way. Before 2023, the SEC had played in every national championship game since 2014, okay? You could take it back to Urban Meyer's team at Florida in 2006 if you want to. You could take it back to Tommy Tuberville's team in Auburn 2004 if you want to. You could also just point to 2007 with LSU and Nick Saban's real only down year and how he won 6 national championships just at Alabama, not including the one he got in 2003 at LSU, right? Then we get 2014, which feels like a blip, and we get back to what we expect, right? Everybody else versus the SEC. And just 2 years ago, we were thinking that Georgia was about to put a stranglehold on the sport, let alone the SEC. They won 2 national championships back-to-back years after not winning one for 40 years, okay? One of the teams that they ran over to get to a national title game the first time, Oklahoma, okay? Now, add to this, the SEC is not going to play in the national championship game for a consecutive season, okay? The last time that happened was before we even thought about the college football playoff and at the birth of the BCS, back when it felt like Florida State was running everything with Miami. That's how far back we gotta go. It's been theirs, right? And we talk about winning national championships, it's been theirs too. But now, with Penn State being able to get to the college football playoff for the first time, but also Notre Dame beating a Georgia team that started the year nobody thought they were going to beat, you have to start thinking about it. And then you have to add into this, none of the SEC teams from 2022 or 2023 made the 4-team playoff. It's just funny, right? I take that back. 2023, they did. Alabama, that's my bad. That's where else I was going. The SEC champion doesn't really mean you're going to play for the national championship anymore. Like, that used to be what it is. We've had whole years where the SEC champion and the runner-up played for the national championship. Like, that was the game. Now, we're looking at Michigan, who beat Alabama twice in a row. Once when it absolutely counted at the Rose Bowl, and once just earlier this week in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Then you got to take into account Georgia, who felt like they were left out of that thing last year, and they should have. You lost to Bama. They win the SEC championship this year against a former Big 12 team, Texas. And now Texas is the team carrying the SEC on its mantle, showing up like Hangman in Top Gun Maverick, they hope. Talking about, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your savior speaking, because that's who the Longhorns have to be to keep the SEC on its perch. Now, if Texas beats Ohio State, wins the national championship, probably going to have a different conversation. That's why I think it could be here, but we're not quite sure just yet, because Texas would have to get beat by Ohio State. And then if they get beat down by Ohio State, which, by the way, is within reason, if you've been watching that Ohio State football team, you understand this is what it is. Oklahoma is like Georgia in this way, like Oregon in this way, right? Or was, I should say, Georgia, the Oklahoma comparison. We expect them to get back, right? Oklahoma wins the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma plays in the college football playoff, gets beat down, doesn't make you a national championship game. You know the story. That's why I'm making the comp. because SEC teams are now getting to a place where they might not make it past the quarterfinals, right? Like the SEC champion didn't make it past the quarterfinals, and they got the home game. Now, some of this is seeding, because the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 seed, all the teams that got the bye week, they lost. And you might attribute that to rust. You might attribute that to the teams that they played were actually seeded incorrectly, which is also true, right? You could do a lot of things, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, they lost the game on neutral sites. You know, like there's no real home field advantage here. And we thought a better team than what you showed in these games because you lost. Then there's teams like Boise State and Arizona State, right? Should they have been seeded where they are? I don't think that Georgia and the comp to Boise State or Arizona State works here, right? Because they're conference champions, and I get it. All the conference champions also lost before reaching the quarterfinals, including Clemson. It doesn't work because we don't expect Boise State and Arizona State to get back here. Arizona State could. Boise State could, right? But we don't expect it. We expect an SEC or Big 12 champion to get back, right? Arizona State also was picked dead last, but turned the roster over. So it's possible, right? Turn the roster over again. Maybe you can do this again. But I think the comp to Oklahoma is much more accurate when talking about Alabama, Georgia, LSU, those teams, because the knock on Oklahoma was always, who cares about the Big 12? It's not that good. You're not that good. Every time you play an SEC team, you get beat down. You play Clemson, you get beat down. How many more times are we going to have to do this? Well, we're asking the same question of the SEC. Now, I think all of this, again, is a little bit out in front because Texas still got to play, but also because recruiting does not reflect that the SEC is getting weaker. It reflects that teams within the SEC are getting weaker. So check this out. Take a look at some recruiting rankings for 2024-2025. So the SEC continues to just raid high school, even as we're in the age of the transfer portal. 37 5-stars in the 247 composite went to the SEC, but that was across 10 schools in 2024, right? They didn't all go to Bama. They didn't all go to LSU. They didn't all go to Georgia. Then you've got 16 of the 24 5-stars in the composite that went across 9 SEC teams in 2025, right? You keep doing this all the way down, you can get to Texas and Oklahoma being included in the total that from 21 and 20 to 24, I mean, you're talking about 16 to 35, right? It's really remarkable that we've seen this kind of flattening inside the SEC and what it has meant to how we feel about the SEC. Because I still think it's a damn good conference, and I still think it's the deepest conference in college football. But what they were able to do with Georgia, Alabama, and LSU is basically make a funnel. Like those teams were able to make a funnel for 5 stars, 4 stars to come through, and that team would trounce everybody and then trounce for the national championship. Feels like the inverse is happening in the Big Ten. Those teams are Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, right? Penn State kind of been there. Oregon has been getting there, and certainly in the Dan Lanning era. And Ohio State, Michigan, they live there, right? If Michigan recruited like Ohio State, we might be having a different conversation altogether about this. But that's the point, is that the SEC is flattening. And because it's flattening, more of its teams can get picked off by other teams that aren't as flat. Notre Dame recruits against Notre Dame, right? That's what it is. Notre Dame standards, Notre Dame not being in a conference, Notre Dame barnstorming, what it means to have a degree from Notre Dame, let alone what it means to be alumni at Notre Dame. That's not true of Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Auburn. Get what I'm saying here? It's the same question that we had around the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma were the teams that got all the great players, so it seemed, in the Big 12. And every now and again, you get an Oklahoma State that would step up, a Texas Christian, a Kansas State, right? But for the most part, we're talking about OU and Texas in the age of the 12 and 10 team Big 12. So I think that trend is going to keep going. I think as you continue to see flattening of talent, both in the transfer portal and in the recruiting, you're going to have more Georgias getting beat by Notre Dames, more Texases squeaking by Arizona States, and more Alabamas being left out entirely and then getting beat by a Michigan team that ain't got no quarterback. It's getting dicey to be an SEC fan right now. And again, my team is Oklahoma. That's one of the reasons I feel good about making the comp. I'm look, you can't kill me. I'm already dead. 6-7. I'm a ghost. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're in the dark ages right now. I don't even have a defensive coordinator, and I'm not even sure that when we get one, we're going to be able to stop nobody. Because, again, it's flattening. So we'll see. You let me know. Do you think the SEC is flattening? Do you think that Georgia and Alabama are indicative of things to come? Or do you think that this is a blip? I'm going to remind you, back-to-back years, no national title appearance for an SEC team.